back to another episode of the Made Alive podcast, where we have curious conversations about what it means to walk the way of Jesus as we live out the Made Alive life in communion with God, in community with God's people, and committed to the cause of the kingdom. I'm Gregory, and I'm back as your host for this series on presence. And we're so excited to have a variety of our different staff here at LifeGate talking a little bit about what it means to be present with the community of God's people and what it means to be present in our spiritual life. And I'm so excited today to have our very own AJ here to share a little bit with us about emotional presence and what it means to be emotionally present. So AJ, welcome to the Made Alive podcast.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
I know, I'm so glad you're here. Do you mind sharing a little bit about you? Just let people know a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so my name is AJ. Hi. I was born here originally, but I always say that I'm from Texas because that's where I grew up.
Sure.
I spent my childhood there. It's where I went to school. It's where I learned what it meant to be, a human. It's where I learned what it meant to be a Christian. So I always say that I'm from Texas. Texas is always home. I moved to Denver in 2020, right after I graduated college because of a boy. Thankfully it worked out because we're married. And so we've been married for 3 years, and we ended up at LifeGate in 2022, and we've been here since then.
Awesome. Love that. You also have a puppy.
I do have a puppy. His name is Remy.
He's the cutest.
Obsessed.
We all are.
Him.
I mean,
he's the cutest.
So adorable.
Anyways. I'll show pictures of him. If you want to see a picture, let me know.
But yeah, no, I love that you and your husband are both so present here in this community.
Yeah.
You both show up so often here at LifeGate in a variety of ways, whether that's in the young adult community, which I don't think Moy technically is considered a young adult by our standards, but he acts like a young adult in the best way, and he looks like one, and so he's there. We're so present in the young adult community, but you're also present so much just like with our general congregation. And so we're so thankful for that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about emotional presence.
Okay.
So get ready. So who in your life has modeled emotional presence well? And someone who really feels with others, and what impact did they have on you?
Oh, that answer to me is actually very easy. And there's two people that come to mind. The very first one is Emily Flack. And if you've ever known Emily, which you do, thankfully, you know that she is one of the most emotionally in tune and present people I've ever met in my life. She is the first person who welcomed me into his community here at LifeGate, which was really awesome, and showed me what it meant to be emotionally present with people and just sit with people, whether it was in their grief, in their anger, in their joy. And she's done that personally with me. And it has shown me just the impact that can have of I can feel these things and I can move past these things as well, because growing up in a Mexican household or just in any Latino household, you quickly learn that emotions were not something that were talked about. Emotions were something that were actually suppressed a lot of times. Like if you were sad, you weren't allowed to be sad. If you were mad, you better get over it. If you're happy, that's great, but life is hard, and so why are you happy? And it's okay. So growing up, I didn't really know what it meant to have emotion. It was almost like I wasn't allowed to have certain emotions.
A healthy expression of emotion.
Yes. And so when I met Emily and she invited me into this emotional safe space, I could say, it really helped me realize that the Lord really did make every part of me, including my emotion. And so learning what that looks like, learning what healthy emotion expression is, has definitely impacted my life now as a wife, as a friend, and definitely as a worship leader, and what it means to be present with his congregation from a platform or just sitting with him. So Emily Flack for sure. And another one most recently, which is funny because I just talked about my childhood, is actually my mom.
Oh, I love that.
Who in recent years has also kind of learned what it means to be emotionally present, ever since she had my youngest brother. And he is, bless his little soul, he is a very emotional kid. He is a very sensitive child. He feels very deeply, which me and my older brother, we weren't like that growing up. But he is. And so even helping my mom be present with him in a new way and teaching her the things that I have been able to learn has been really awesome. And my mom has become very emotionally present, which I'm okay, I don't need that right now, but thank you for being available to be emotionally present with me right now.
Also, I love that. I think that shows this growth I think so often we think of like spiritual maturity as like, oh, you hit this point and now you're this person that I turn to for wise counsel.
Yes.
But the reality of our lives is that we have moms and dads and people who are way older than us who are also still growing in their faith. Like that's such a cool thing that like maybe that wasn't who your mom was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's who she is today. And like the Lord is working on her life and working in her life and growing that in her. And so now she can be that for you in a way that maybe she wasn't able to be before. And I just think that that is such a cool thing of that emotional presence is like something that we cultivate. It's not necessarily something that we just innately are like, I'm in this space and I'm going to be, some people it is, but for a lot of people it grows over time, right? It's not like an instantaneous thing that we're
it's like a learned behavior.
It really is.
Think.
Yeah. So on that, like I think there's a lot of times where we are present in a community and it's easy to disengage in that. So can you describe a time where you chose to stay emotionally present even when it was uncomfortable or hard, and what happened in that situation?
Sure. I always think back to, do you mean like in the church context or just like
wherever?
I mean,
maybe with the people of God in generally, but
sure. Okay. I think back to a time when I had a family member who was going through just a tough time, man. Like they had just gone through a really hard breakup with who they thought could be their lifelong partner. And so that was really hard. And this person has just longed for marriage and companionship for so much of their life. And I remember them calling me and they were like, why is God teasing me right now? Why is God playing games with my emotions? Why is God playing games with my life? And they were just so angry and they were grieving. And it would have been very easy for me to say, get over it. The relationship is done. Get over it. Like, move on. There's more fish in the sea. It would have been very easy, I think, to say that. But instead, we just sat on the couch and I just let them air it out. And I think sometimes we can confuse emotional validation with emotional presence. And so what they weren't looking for was for me to say, your anger is valid. Your anger at God is valid. Your sadness is valid. They didn't need to hear that. What they needed to see was where the Lord was wanting to bring them into. And so my emotional presence looked a little bit different of saying like, hey, I understand why you feel that way. I understand the why behind your anger. I understand why you would maybe think or maybe want to agree with the enemy that the Lord is teasing you, that he is playing games with you. But the reality is that the Lord has so much more for you. The Lord has something better for you. And I was like, honestly, the best thing you can do is invite the most emotionally present person that we know, which is the Lord, and invite him into this. Because even the word says that he wants to be invited into every part of our lives. He wants to be invited into grief. He wants to sit with you in your 100%. Anger. He wants to sit with you in your joy. But until we do that, we don't really get to learn what his emotional presence looks like in our life. And so for me, my emotional presence there was saying, hey, I hear you. Hey, I understand you. But this is what the Lord is saying for you right now. And I like to think that it helped them. I like to think that they were able to move forward with that. But it was a little bit of a maybe they were wanting to hear like, hey, your anger is valid. But in that moment, that's not what they needed.
Yeah. I think that's really good. I think it reminds me of the story of Job's friends, right? At the beginning of Job. And we see in that this sort of like model of emotional presence, right? Where Job's friends, well, and I mean throughout the story they're not necessarily the best archetypes, but at the beginning, right, once Job has lost everything, and for those that don't know, like Job loses his whole life, like his kids, his home, his everything, with the exception of his wife. He loses everything, and his friends just come, and it says that they sat with him, right, in his grief. Sometimes I think emotional presence is just sitting with people. Like, it's just being present. And like, whether that is physically present, whether that is listening, asking the Lord of like what needs to be said in this moment, and then responding in that, like, but also it's not making light of or making trite people's emotions, right? It's not like how you were saying you grew up where it's like being like, oh, your anger, get over it, right? It's like, no, you're angry, and I think that the Lord wants to be with you in those moments. And I think that that's such a beautiful reminder of like, it's actually not about moving through moving past the emotion just to stuff it down. Because I think so often as Christians we think that we're like, you're too emotional, so we gotta
suck the tears back up.
Yeah, or God's got this, right? How many times have you heard God's got it?
Yes.
But really, in those moments, that's not necessarily what people need to hear. Sometimes they need to hear, yeah, that sucks, and God is still with you. And here's some reminders of God's truth. Yeah. Or they just need to be like, yeah, that sucks. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to let you cry on my shoulder, right? It's this both and emotional presence looks at a variety of different ways.
Yeah, it does.
Can you share with me a little bit of your own story of how joy or grief was shared in a church community? So specifically in a community of followers of God within a church context. I think it could be a small group or a smaller group of people. How joy or grief was shared and what that taught you about God's love and his presence in your life.
Yeah, I always think of two instances when I think of how a deep emotion was shared and what the Lord taught. And I always think of baptisms.
Ooh, love them.
There's something about a baptism. One, it gets me going, and I'm like, me next. Throw me in the tank.
Yeah. I've been baptized, but
at this point, maybe 7 times because of how many times I just want to get baptized. But I think for me was when, oh, dude, I might cry.
That's okay.
When my cousin decided to get baptized in December. And it had been just this year long of fighting for her to come back to the Lord.
This is great. I'm sorry, I don't have tissues in here.
No, it's okay. And there was definitely a grief that she felt of, and almost this guilt of she wasn't Christian enough to be baptized, that there was no way that the Lord could love her that much. And so 2 parts to this. One, of just getting to sit with her in that grief and disappointment of, what if I'm not this? What if I'm actually not good enough? And just being able to sit there and tell her, hey, I get it. We've all been there. We've all felt like we were not worthy of the Lord's goodness, of the Lord's love. But we are. And he says
and
so.
You are. Yeah.
And you are. And so as we were working through this idea of her getting baptized and just being made new, she finally agreed, which was so fantastic. And I remember when she called me and said, hey, I'm going to get baptized on December 18th. Will you baptize me? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I would love to. And so December 18th came around and I called her and she said, I don't know if I'm going to do it.
Yes.
I was like, okay, but pause. Let's pause before you make a crazy decision, because you've already said yes. And you didn't say yes out of pure emotion. You said yes because you truly have decided to make the Lord over your life. Yeah. And you want to live for him. You want to live in a way that's righteous and pleasing to him.
Absolutely.
And she said, I know. She's like, but I can't. I'm scared to be the first in my family. And I was like, okay, you're not the first. We have generations that have gone before us. And it might feel like you're the first because out of you and your brother, you're the only one that's following the Lord.
Yeah.
And so she was like, no, you're right. I'm going to do it. And so she got baptized. And just as I sat there at the tank, and there is a picture of it, they actually got it on video, where I'm just looking at her and I'm just smiling. And in that moment, I could see just the Lord turn his face towards her. And I just felt this extreme joy. And we dunked her, and she came back up. And this happens with every baptism. If you've ever been to a baptism at LifeGate, the room erupts with just celebration and with so much joy. And to me, that's a glimpse of heaven.
Yeah.
To me, that joy and the celebration of heaven just getting one more person crowded is just the way that the Lord looks at us with so much joy, and the joy that he wants to give us. And so when we dunk her, she comes back, the room erupts. I'm sobbing. I'm just so happy that this is happening. I'm like, me next. Do you want to baptize me? Let's get in the tank. So let's do this together. But I think what it taught me is like so many times we think of emotional presence or just emotion as negative. So much when you hear someone saying you're such an emotional person, it's always almost taken negatively
as a negative thing.
Because you think of they're always sad or they're always angry or they're always whatever. But so many times we fail to see the other side, which is the joy, and it's the joy that the Lord has promised us. And so even being emotionally present in celebration has taught me that the Lord's goodness is so much more than we could ever think of or imagine. Or the true joy that he has for us is not just this fleeting moment. It's a joy that has lasted since December 18th that my cousin got baptized in her life, and I've seen it and how that has translated in every single moment that I see her. She's happier, she's more joyful, she is seeing the Lord in a new light, and she's not afraid to be the first in her family anymore.
And I also think that I think so often when we become emotionally present, like you're talking about with your cousin here, we begin almost to upend these like cycles of emotional selfishness. I don't know if that's like the right term for it, but like staying so caught in our own like cycle of negative emotion that like I just keep hearing as we're talking like death, or like the night is right, like joy comes in the morning, like the sorrow endures for the night but joy comes in the morning, right? And that there is this like thing all throughout scripture where death and sorrow and grief are super important. It is super important that we don't move too quickly through those stages, and I think that the Jewish people modeled that so well throughout scripture of like we have to sit in grief and in repentance and in contrition, right?
And even remember the grief, remember the pain that we once went through.
Exactly. But also in that there is a hope. That we're not left in the grief, we're not left in the sorrow. There is a movement into hope that comes through that, and that even when we're in the pits of despair, right, the valley of the shadow of death, whatever you want to call it, that there is this joy. That like your cousin's circumstances probably haven't changed drastically since December 18th.
No, she would probably argue they've gotten worse.
Sure, right. But yet there's still this like this deeper, more resounding, like my circumstances may not change, but yet I still have this enduring hope and joy. And I think that only comes when people can be emotionally present with you and help you in both the moments of grief and celebrate with you in the moments of joy, right? It's the both and, it's not one or the other. It's like they're married. They're like together in most things. I would love for you to share a little bit about your own experience, like a time where somebody has made space for you, for your emotions. I know you talked a little bit about M, but could you maybe share like a more like, I don't know, personal experience of a time when somebody made space for your emotions in a way that reflected this like kind of idea of emotional presence that we're talking about?
That's hard because I just keep going back to M.
It could be M. It could be like a moment. Like it doesn't have to be something super deep, but
sure. This is, I feel like, the most recent that I can remember. I think would be Flock once again. I would say that, and you know this too. Like last year was really hard. The beginning of last year in February, I lost my job out of the blue. It was the craziest thing. Came all the way from left field, had no idea that it was coming. Thought I was getting promoted, which is crazier. And then they're like, "No, you're done." And I was like, "Oh." But I remember just feeling so angry and so just scared. Scared, and just loss of like, what do you mean? What do you mean I don't have a job anymore? The job that I thought that I was going to spend 5-10 years at, really building my career and like establishing myself as a public relations professional, and the rug got
pulled out from under me.
I was going to be swept under me, but
it's okay.
Same thing.
Same idea.
And I just remember just being so upset. But anytime anyone would ask me, I was just like, "Oh no, I'm good. I'm fine." I was doing the thing that I was taught to do. Which was just
push it down.
No, I'm okay. And God's got it. God's got it. And I remember I kept saying, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
Like every day. But the reality was I was not okay at all. I was waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks. I was just so afraid of the unknown, of the future that was to come. And I remember out of the blue, Emily was like, hey, do you want to come over? And I was like, sitting in my bed applying for jobs. And I was like, I could have easily said, no, I have better things to do. I need to find a job. But instead, I felt the Lord's tug of like, hey, you should probably go. You should just go sit. And I was like, sure, I'll come over. And I remember I just got there. And she just had Nico, little baby Neeks. And we were sitting there, and I got to meet Nico for the first time. And I remember I just held him. And I looked at him, and I just smiled. And I was like, that's how God looks at you right now. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Because I kind of hate him right now, and I'm really angry. And she just sat with me.
Yeah.
And she let me cry. It's like what you said. Sometimes it's just sitting with someone and just letting them be and just be angry and be upset. And I sat there, and I was holding Nico, and I was just crying. I was like, Emily, what is happening? It's like, why am I crying so much? I thought I was okay. She's like, you weren't okay. She's like, but that's why we're sitting here. She's like, and so I just want you to tell me everything you're feeling. She's like, start at the beginning and go from there. She's like, there's no emotion that's too big for me or for God. And I said, okay, Amen. Okay, sure. And I just remember just sobbing and just telling her, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's next. How am I going to live in Denver? It's so expensive here. And am I going to have to move back to Texas? Does Moy want to move back to Texas? Like, what are we doing? And she just sat with me. And there was no advice. There was no, you'll get over it. There was no, I knew, the Lord has more for you. There was none of that. It was just her sitting with me. Sitting with me in the grief, letting me feel every emotion that came to mind. And then helping me feel the joy. Yeah. Afterward. Just like you said, it's that both and. Yeah. I was just sitting and grieving what I had lost. But also, she was able to help turn my attention to, like you said, the hope that there was in this. Because it really wasn't. We realized I was not happy at that job. Yeah. It was so bad. And she helped me realize that, this was actually a good thing. The pain that I felt, the grief that I was feeling, the fear, the disappointment, even the anger was good. And I had never, ever seen negative emotion as something good. But it was something that the Lord, what I learned was that a negative emotion was pulling me to a need that I had. And here's what she said. She said, when Nico cries, or when Nico is sad, when Nico is feeling a certain way, his cry means that he has a need for something. So if he's crying because he's sad, it means he needs comfort. Yeah. If he's crying because he's frustrated or he's angry, it's because he needs a wrong rectified. Yeah. If he's crying because he's hungry, he needs that hunger to be satisfied, Yeah. She's like, and so your emotion, your tear, what you feel is a response to a need that maybe you weren't aware that you had, that the Lord wants to provide for you. Yeah. And so I sat in my anger and I let it be good. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks to him. Yeah. For just being there. Gosh, don't we love and letting me hold Nico. Yeah, the babes, man. They do. Some of our little baby cuddle, man. But also, I think I love that. I love the expression of friendship in that, right? Of that friendship isn't always just the fun, good moments of life. Yeah. And I think that as the people of God, as the community of God's people, our intention should be to allow it to not just be that we have to just have all of the, when you see somebody in the lobby and you know that they had a hard week or there's something going on in their life that's challenging, and they give you the smile and pass it off as oh, I'm great, instead of allowing that to become commonplace and just the thing of pressing in. And maybe that looks like prayer. Yeah. Maybe that looks like sitting with somebody. Maybe it looks like asking them if they want to go for a walk or be at their house or whatever, right? Whatever is right in that moment. I don't think
there's like a prescriptive thing
Yeah.
when it comes to emotional presence.
Yeah.
But I do think that as the people of God, our role should be to say, we are not alone in these hard and big emotions. And I think in our Western culture, it's easy for us to isolate in that and to be like, oh, I'm supposed to perform this way. As a Christian, I'm supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And instead of allowing ourselves to lean into those performative places, instead allowing ourselves to be emotionally present. And I think that is so beautiful that you had a friend who allowed that space.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that now you have also allowed that space for other friends. I know you did it for your cousin.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can do it for so many other people now as a result of that happening for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, kind of go back to what you said of like, especially not even just as Christians. So there's a level of performative as a Christian to have it all put together. But then I think there's even another level of like, well, we're on the staff at a church.
Oh, sure.
How could we let our life fall apart? Like, there's no way that we could ever be sad. We work at a church. We cannot have anything ever going wrong in our life. Yeah. And it's almost like you devalue the hardship or the emotion that you're feeling to make space for someone else in the congregation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow us to be fully emotionally present with ourselves in that moment.
Sure.
Because I think being emotionally present doesn't mean just being with someone.
Yes.
It also means understanding where you are in the moment.
100%. Yes.
And if we continue to just push down whatever we're feeling to make space for someone else, then where's the space for us? And I know that God holds a space for us. Of course he does. But where do we find, that solace? And it's learning to be emotionally present with yourself too.
Sure.
Especially in those moments of being emotionally present with someone else.
Yeah.
So
I think that is a beautiful way for us to kind of wrap up this conversation is that idea of being both emotionally present with others and also not allowing others' emotional presence, like you being emotionally present with others, to repress your own emotions.
Yeah.
Because God created us as these beautiful, complex, unique beings who have very large and very complex emotions at times. And so we're allowed to be sad when our friends are sad, and we're allowed to be angry when our friends are angry, and inviting the Lord into that even when that is happening, I think is super important as well.
Yeah.
So, AJ, thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for this awesome conversation. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Make sure you tune in next week as we continue our series on presence. Thanks for being here.
Bye.